Well, today we're going to look at the topic of laziness. And before you nudge the neighbor next to you, you might be convicted yourself because we're going to cover a lot of ground. And as I was studying this topic of laziness, I came upon an illustration of the laziest man in America. Apparently there was some kind of award many years ago, and they located this man in the mountains of West Virginia. And he ended up winning the award of laziest man in America, and he was going to get like a $10,000 check or something. So the company that had this award to present, they came to the door of the laziest man in America, and they knocked on it to find that the house was really unkempt and not well maintained. And they knock on the door, and they're waiting on this man, and lo and behold, his daughter opens the door. And they said, "Is Mr. Jackson here?" And she said, "Oh, my father, yes, he's outside in the backyard. He's resting, but he's near the flower garden, so I'll take you over there." So they walk through the house, and he's looking around like, man, this house is falling apart. And then he goes outside, and he finds Mr. Jackson laying on his side. His eyes were closed, but he was open, or he was awake. And so lo and behold, the man presenting the check said, "Hey, Mr. Jackson." And Mr. Jackson doesn't turn around to acknowledge this man. And he said, "I'm here to present your check." And Mr. Jackson just said, "Oh, just," without opening his eyes, "just roll me over and put the check in my pocket and I'll be fine." Although this is a far-fetched story, it shows us the sluggard. It gives us an example of a sluggard. That's the word used all throughout Proverbs describing the lazy person. Lazy person. When you think of a sluggard, you might think of the slug, you know, that thing that just oozes slowly as it travels on your driveway. Or you might think of, I talked about the sloth a couple weeks ago, the sloth character that just moves very slowly and eats very slowly and does everything slowly. I think about a syrup bottle that's been in the freezer, and then you get it out and you try to squeeze it, and it's hard, and it just starts to slowly ooze out from the top. That is what sloth is. That's what a sluggard is. It's sluggish, slow, very hesitant. And when you think about the sluggard, you probably immediately think about the 35-year-old man who lives in his parents' home. And he lives in the basement, and he plays video games all day, and he eats pizza, and he drinks Mountain Dew. That's probably the first thought that you had in mind, is that 35-year-old man that's living at home. That is one picture of the sluggard, and we're going to see that could be the sluggard. But I also want you to think about your own life, and I think you're going to be convicted, because I sure was, as we unpacked these proverbs. So the first proverb I want to focus in on, and this is where we're camping around the entire sermon, is Proverbs 15:19. "The way of a sluggard is like a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is a level highway." The way of a sluggard is like a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is straight and it's level. So let's talk first about the sluggard, and then we'll talk about the upright. The sluggard is described of living a life that has a hedge of thorns around him. The book of Proverbs talks over and over and over again about life being like a journey that we're all on. It's a path or a way that we travel. It's a course that we're going down. It's a direction that we're moving towards. And the way of the fool leads down basically the way of a sluggard. It's the way of the wicked. It's foolishness. But the way of the wise fears the Lord, and they're upright, and they have a narrow but yet straight path. And this is what Proverbs mentions time and time and time again. And here in Proverbs 15:19, we learn that the way of a sluggard, the path, the journey of a sluggard, is like a hedge of thorns. What does that mean? It means when you think about thorns, they're prickly, they hurt, it's painful. A sluggard, a sloth, a lazy person ends up having a lot of pain in their lives because they're not able to progress. They're not able to move. They're not able to move forward. Life is overgrown for them with thorns, pain, and even neglect. And it's hard for them to make any progress. And because their lives are filled with thorns, you end up taking a journey to their home, and you see that their home has been overgrown with thorns. There's a picture in Proverbs 24 that helps us to see this. I passed by the field of a sluggard, by the vineyard of a man lacking sense. And behold, it was all overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. So as I read through Proverbs, really it's a father instructing a son. And believe it or not, this sluggard kept showing up throughout the Proverbs. It was like a father instructing a young teenage son, don't live the life of laziness, because it will lead to poverty and it will lead to nothing good. But you'll end up having a home that is overgrown with thorns, and you can't even get out of the home because of laziness. So we can see in this picture of Proverbs 24 that the house is overgrown with thorns, and the man can't go anywhere. He can't even leave his front door. He's cut off from all progress. But this didn't happen overnight. So how did the sluggard get to this horrible point? What got him there? And I believe there's 4 things that Proverbs tells us that the sluggard did to get him to this point. And we go to Proverbs 26, and this is where, I've read Proverbs a number of times throughout my life. I never saw this as comedy. But as we go through Proverbs 26, you're going to see the comedy in this. It is really funny. So Proverbs 26, 13 through 16 says, the sluggard says, there's a lion in the road, there's a lion in the streets. As the door turns on its hinges, so does a sluggard on his bed. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish. It wears him out to bring it up to his mouth. The sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. It's really comedic, and let's unpack it. So the downward digression of the sluggard, okay? It's really a progression, but we're gonna see this downward spiral of neglect of the sluggard. Let's look at verse 13. What does he first do? He makes excuses to go to work, or not to go to work. He makes excuses. Verse 13, the sluggard says, there's a lion in the road. There's a lion in the streets. Now, what's going on here? Well, in ancient Palestine, lions were around. But there weren't so many of them where it would keep you from going outside. But yet, this sluggard is plagued with paranoia, plagued with fear. If I leave the house, then I'll be attacked by a lion. You know what this makes me think of? It makes me think of us. And let's just imagine that we're worried about coyotes. Because in East Tennessee, coyotes are around us. I've seen a few of them, even in our backyard at times. It's like, oh, a coyote came in the back. We need to hide our animals. There are coyotes around here. But it's just as if any of us one day just woke up and told our spouse or our kids, I'm not gonna go outside because I'm worried about the coyote. The coyote's gonna be in our neighborhood. The coyote's gonna come and get me. You see how laughable this is? But yet this man, he made an excuse. He doesn't want to take the risk that everybody else is taking. And he's saying, I'm just worried. And paranoia is plaguing him to the point where he can't move and make progress. Now again, the sluggard is making up excuse not to work. But yet when everyone else is brave and everybody else leaves their home to go to work, why should he be excused? What makes him exempt? If you think about it, before you just picture this 35-year-old male living in his parents' basement, drinking Mountain Dew and eating pizza and playing video games, think about some days where you don't want to go to work. What are some reasons that you may give? I'm just not really feeling up for it today. I'm not feeling well. I've got this little sniffle and I'm not just feeling well. I'm going to call in sick. And you're really not that sick. I have too much to do at home. I got all these honey-do lists and I got too much to do. Or I'm just too tired. I'm just too tired. I just want to sleep in today. I need to catch up on my sleep. Or I just don't want to take any risks. It's a scary world out there, and I'm just going to play it safe home. After all, I got security here, and I've got everything I need right here. I don't want to leave. We all can make excuses, right? But the sluggard is a master of excuses. And again, he's plagued with paranoia. So that's the first thing that the sluggard does, is he makes excuses not to go to work. But the second thing he does is interesting. You can start seeing it kind of get worse for him. He stays in bed. Verse 14, as a door turns on its hinges, so does a sluggard on his bed. Here's where we see the comedy build. Solomon compared the lazy being stuck to their bed like a door with hinges. So it's like this person, the sluggard, has two slots in his back, which has been created to fit the hinges of his bed. And when he gets into it and he gets secured in these hinges, he's able to turn left and he's able to turn right in his bed. And that's all he can do. He can just toss and turn in his bed, flipping side to side, but never getting out of the bed and never really being useful. You know, you think about it and how we can hit that snooze button. Boop. 5 minutes snooze turns into an hour. Then 2 hours go by, and then it's too late to get to work at that point. One author described this as a door moves but goes nowhere. It is motion without march, movement without mobility. Just so the sluggard flips and flops from side to side, but never makes any progress toward getting out of bed and making his life useful. Again, the sluggard is used to hitting that snooze button and saying, just another 5 minutes. But then it becomes too late to work. Now, hear me say this. Rest is a good thing. Sleep is a good thing. After all, we need sleep to function properly and to do the work that we're set out to do. Proverbs 3:24 even tells us that there is blessing in a good night's sleep. But we can allow sleep to become a god to us. And there are other proverbs that speak on sleeping too much and the negative effects it has on us. Proverbs 20, verse 13, love not sleep lest you come to poverty. Don't fall in love with it too much. Proverbs 6, 9 through 11, how long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber and want like an armed man. Now, it's one thing to love sleep, but it's another thing to be lazy. Not only does a sluggard not only is he a procrastinator, but his motto is, I'll get to that later. Tomorrow is their favorite word. Tomorrow's gonna be here. We'll get to that tomorrow. So let's put it in our terms. Husbands in the room, do you have that honey-do list like I do that is growing? And you're saying, honey, I'm gonna get to that. Months go by and you still hadn't gotten to it? Yeah, I was convicted this week. Yeah, Stephanie's like, yeah. Students in the room, you know what? I'll study for that final. And then you wait till the day before and you cram and you're up all night. Have you ever done that? I've done that in my time. Workers in the room, can I get an extension on this project or this deadline? Can we just extend it out a little bit further? Or if you're a student, can I just extend it out a little bit further? Christians, all of us Christians in the room, I'll get up tomorrow to do the devotions. You know, let's just sleep in. I need to sleep. I'll get to it tomorrow. And then a month goes by and a year goes by and you're like, wait, what just happened? Our life motto can be, don't rush me. And that's the motto of the sluggard. Don't rush me. We'll get to that later. Tomorrow's coming. But yet, if we're not careful, we can lose one opportunity after another, day by day, moment by moment, until we lie there helpless and have wasted time. Tomorrow is the favorite word of the sluggard. You know who else's favorite word it is? Satan. The devil loves the word tomorrow. He loves it. He loves it. So the sluggard gets worse, not only because he makes excuses, but because he stays in bed. He's not moving. He's not making any progress. He's hinged to that bed. Number 3, verse 15, what do we see about the sluggard? He doesn't finish his tasks. This is where the comedy gets really good. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish and it just wears him out to bring it back to his mouth. This is where it's like, okay, this is exaggeration here. Solomon said it's as if the guy is eating food, porridge in his day, and he's literally putting the spoon in his mouth and he just falls asleep. I mean, that's not gonna happen, but this is where we get. But here's what I find really interesting, and I really want you to focus in on this. The problem is that the sluggard goes from I won't do it to I can't do it. The unwilling person convinces themselves that they are unable. Let me say that again. I'm unwilling to work, therefore I'm unable to work. And you begin to have this in your mindset, I can't work, I'm just unable. I'm gonna get on my soapbox here for a minute. But there are millions of Americans who are abusing and using the system. You know what I mean by that? Government checks. And they're waiting every month for that government check to come to help them. Now, there are people who need help and assistance. There are people who are physically disabled and they're in wheelchairs. They are mentally handicapped where they can't speak, can't see. There are those exceptions to the rule. There are exceptions, but hear me on this, exceptions. I've studied this. I was a political science major in college and I found that the majority of people on welfare should not be on welfare. Should not be on it. But yet the government's not helping by just, let's help these people. No. The Bible tells us if you don't work, you don't eat. And what gives you a pass from working? There are days, I'll be honest, I love what I do. I love it. I love being a pastor. But just like all of you, there's days where I don't want to go to work. There's days, it's not many, but there are days. And I'm sure there's a lot of you that feel the same way. I don't want to get up and go to work, it's hard. Or I don't want to deal with that boss, or I don't want to deal with that employee, or I don't want to have to, it hurts. Like I'm doing manual labor, it hurts. Well, that's life. And so again, there are exceptions. Hear me on that, okay? There are exceptions. But don't convince yourself that you're an exception if you're not. And that's what the sluggard does. He lives a life of unwillingness, and then it becomes, I'm unable. I just can't do it. Well, yes, you can. Yes, you can. It doesn't make you exempt where others are working hard. But yet, here's the problem with the sluggard. Proverbs 19:15, slothfulness will cast you into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger. Because your mindset goes from I'm unwilling to do it to I'm unable to do it, it's gonna catch up to you one way or the other. And you're gonna be broke. You're gonna have hedges of thorns around your home because you haven't been able to keep up your home. You might go bankrupt. I used to watch the show Repo Man, where these guys would come and take your cars from you. It's intense, You might have your car repoed. It ain't good. 2 Thessalonians tells us if you don't work, you don't eat. Paul was instructing young pastors to tell their congregants, make sure that they don't live a life of idleness, but that they work hard for the Lord so they can be self-sufficient. They can be personally responsible for themselves and not rely on other people. Paul says that time and time again. 2 Thessalonians, Galatians, he's saying, bear your own burden. Carry your own load is what he instructs us. Proverbs 12, there's humor here. Whoever is slothful will not roast his game. What is he saying here? He's saying that the sluggard is great at not finishing tasks. He's good at just not finishing tasks. And I want you to imagine a man who back in the day would go out and hunt for food, and he would kill the animal, and then he would bring the animal home, and instead of skinning it and preparing it, he would just look at it and say, I don't want to do the extra work. The sluggard will not roast his game. Again, before you beat up the person next to you and nudge them, there have been times where my wife has gone out of town, whether it's to visit her mom and I wasn't able to go, or a girls' night, and she'll go and It's pretty rare. I'm trying to make that more regular for her. But when she does go, she'll have a list for me. And she does a lot of work. I mean, she'll go to the grocery store. She'll make it really simple for me. And she'll say, I got your refrigerator stocked with food. I've got the pantry filled up. Here's some recipes you use, like step-by-step recipes. And if you do these things, the kids will eat well. And I've really laid it out for you. And I'm always like, thank you, Stephanie, this is great. Well, she goes away for a few days and comes back, and she sees that the refrigerator is still full, the pantry's still full, and the recipe hasn't been touched, hasn't even moved. And she looks at me and she says, what happened? We talked through this, like, what happened? And she sees that I spent money. What's going on here? Well, Stephanie, I got busy, we got active as the kids, and I just thought it'd be easier to order takeout or pizza, and we ate mac and cheese and chicken nuggets and pizza and spaghetti and donuts. They were really good. And she's like, well, one, you spent money, and two, our kids barely survived. I bring this up because all of us can be like this, right? We can all be like this, where we have good intentions, but we might even cook it in our heads and taste the food in our imaginations, but when it takes that extra effort to cook, to boil the pot, or to even put the casserole in the oven, we choose not to do it. You think about with work too, there was a funny movie, Office Space. There was a character in the movie who said, in an average week, I'd say I'd only work about 20 minutes of actual work. That's it. That is the life of the sluggard. And if you're not careful, it can happen to the best of us. I was convicted looking at my toilet paper roll the other day. And for several days, you see that cardboard toilet paper roll. It's a pretty simple fix. It's still sitting there. The light needs to be changed. It still hasn't been changed. Pretty simple. But if you neglect these things, they begin to build up. And next thing you know, you have a hedge of thorns that are surrounding your home. And that's what happens to the sluggard. He doesn't finish his tasks. The fourth thing we notice in Proverbs 26 is that the sluggard doesn't listen to counsel. This is where it gets really bad. Because the sluggard thinks that he's right. And he's convincing others, I'm right here. Verse 16, the sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. The sluggard becomes so content with his slothful lifestyle that he convinces himself that he's wiser than 7 discerning men, 7 wise men who are hardworking. He's saying, why are they working so hard? I think I figured this thing out. He will not face things as they really are. And rather than embracing the challenges of life, he just dreams up excuses. The sluggard is really discontent. It's sad. He's really dissatisfied in life because he's dreaming and he's wanting to start things, but he never finishes it. So he starts something else and never finishes it. And so he lives a life of just disappointment and frustration and difficulty. But it gets so bad that he ends up isolating himself from even those who are close to him, because he believes that he's wiser than everybody else and he wants to convince everybody in his way. But his relationships begin to fall apart because of neglect. You see now how the sluggard got to where he was? It was a progression, a downward spiral of making excuses, sleeping in, of not finishing tasks, and then of not even listening to counsel from other people. So before we briefly talk about the upright, what about you? What are areas in your life that you've neglected? Maybe it's your spiritual life. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe it's your relationship with your kids. Maybe it's your work. Maybe it's your retirement portfolio. I don't know. Maybe it's your health. I mean, there's a lot of obesity in America. Maybe it's your health. What is it that you're neglecting? And give that to the Lord and ask him to help you. So we won't end here. We're going to end on a positive note. And we go back to Proverbs 15:19 and discover that there's another person that's talked about, and that is the upright. The path of the upright is a level highway. When I think about the word upright, I looked at the Hebrew. It means straight, stretched, level, smooth. It even means that which is pleasing to the Lord. So how does the person who is upright get to that point? How are they able to stay on a straight and narrow path? Well, there's a few things. First, we don't get to that point. God is the one who makes us upright. Proverbs 2 tells us, "For the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He's a shield to those who walk in integrity." Right here, you can just see the beautiful picture. God is the one who changes us. He makes us upright. He makes us holy. And then he keeps us on the track, on the path. And he guards us, not with thorns, but he guards us with a shield, his presence. Isaiah 26 tells us the path of the righteous is level. You make level the way of the righteous. He's the one who makes level the way of the righteous. He's the one who keeps us on that straight path. So again, it's only by the grace of God that we go, because all of us struggle with slothfulness. I wanted to emphasize that slothfulness is sin. And so how do we get on that straight and narrow path? God, he's the one who does it. And when you begin to understand that God is the one who dramatically saves you and changes you, then you want to have a relationship with him. So the second thing I would say is we are to repent of our laziness and trust in the Lord and ask him to keep us on the straight path. The Lord is the one who keeps us on the path, and at the same time, we have responsibility to walk in his ways. And we do so first by praying to him, asking the Lord, help me to stay on the path. Help me to have trust in you. Proverbs 15:8, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is acceptable to him. The prayer of the upright is acceptable and pleasing to the Lord as we pray to him, as we ask him to keep us pure and keep us on the straight and narrow path. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, the most popular proverb that many of you have memorized. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not in your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him. And what will he do? He will lead your path straight as you trust in him, as you pray to him, as you say, Lord, I'm coming to you weak and empty and feeble, and I need you to get me on the path. I need you to help me to be upright and righteous and holy. A third thing we do is we actually need to stop and reflect on our spiritual walk. Proverbs 4:26 says to ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. To ponder the path of your feet, to ponder, to reflect, to think about, am I going down the right path? Am I going in the right direction? 52 days a year, all of us have a time where we can do this. It's called the Sabbath. And so later this afternoon, I encourage you to literally stop for a few moments. Don't scroll on your phones. Don't watch NFL. Stop for a few moments and ponder and ask yourself, how am I doing with the Lord? How is my spiritual walk going right now? Have I made any progress from last year, or am I worse, or am I at the same point? Stop and reflect. When I was on sabbatical this summer, I had 2 months to just really reflect. And as I was there on sabbatical, I read a lot about just rest. And I came upon a true story of how Seventh-day Adventists, they live on average 10 years longer than anybody else in America. Now, why is that? Seventh-day Adventists, they observe the Sabbath on Saturday, but they're very strict, like Puritans, about the Sabbath. And they rest really well and intentionally. As a result, it's good for their health, it's good for their body, and they live on average 10 years longer than the rest of us. Well, if you want to live longer, I'm excited about heaven. At the same time, if you want to live longer, if you hope to live longer, observe the Sabbath. Rest, reflect, unwind. It is a gift that God gives us. It's a blessing, a gift. Sabbath was made for man, not us for the Sabbath. So again, stop and reflect. And Proverbs 21 tells us, a wicked man puts on a bold face, but the upright gives thoughts to his ways. The upright gives thoughts to his ways. You actually stop for a moment. And in our busy, crazy world, we don't stop. But yet we get lost in the scrolling, the news feeds, and the phone. Put the phone down, parent your phone. I learned about that this summer. We need to parent our phone, give guardrails to it, parent it, and say, no phone, you stay over here. And I'm going to reflect on my spiritual walk. I'm going to reflect on my relationships with my family. I'm going to actually engage in conversation. And one other thing that Proverbs mention is to consider the ant. Instead of just going to the classroom, go to the ant hill. And you can learn a lot from the ant. Proverbs 6, go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. What does the ant do? Saves for a rainy day, prepares for the winter, stores up for the harvest, works hard, works independently, isn't very intentional. We can study a lot, not from the slug, but we learn from the ant and consider her ways and learn from her. The last and final thing I would say is that we don't just know that God gives us wisdom. He's the one that makes us upright. We don't just pray and repent and trust in him. We don't just stop and reflect and consider our walk with the Lord. But ultimately, we are called to take up our cross and follow Jesus and learn from him. You know, as a teenager, Jesus wasn't asked by his mother to do chores, and he didn't, I don't want to do chores. You know, I remember as a teen, and I know a lot of kids struggle with this, and teenagers struggle with it. When it's summertime, when it's weekends, when it's breaks, it's easy to say, I'm bored. And then mom and dad says, well, why don't you come help us with the yard work? Or why don't you come help us around the house? And so often, what do the teens say? Well, I'm not that bored, right? Jesus, as a teenager, what did he do? Luke 2:52. He increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. He was intentional. The God-man, as we learn from him, we follow him, we give him our lives, we learn from him and see that he worked hard. Now, I just can't imagine the masterpiece work that Jesus did as a carpenter. I mean, I've always wondered, I just wonder what he built, what he made with his hands. And a lot of you who love woodworking, just imagine what Jesus was able to build, But he worked hard. We also know that he didn't shirk his responsibilities. He didn't say, well, tomorrow I'll worry about it. But he said, today's a new day. And he worked hard. So we follow Christ. We learn from him as he is our perfect example and model to follow. Proverbs 16:17, the highway of the upright turns aside from evil. Whoever guards his way preserves his life. Let that sink into your mind as we close. The highway of the upright, straight, turns aside from evil, and whoever guards his way preserves his life from the thorns, the hedge of thorns, and is able to stay on the straight and narrow path.